James Creedon joins us. Good evening to you, sir.
Evening, Mark.
Now, lots of reaction in the French media to the anti-gay marriage demonstration, which, of course, packed Paris yesterday.
That's right. And in particular, a lot of reaction to an opinion piece written by the Interior Minister, Manuel Valls, in a Sunday paper here in France, the Journal du Dimanche. Now, he compared the Manif pour tous, as it's known, or the anti-gay marriage movement, bearing in mind that this was legislated for last May, and this is February of the next year, so still people demonstrating against that. He compared this and other movements that we've seen recently to a French version of the Tea Party emerging. Now, the Tea Party, as we know, is a kind of a very conservative right-wing movement out kind of to the right of the Republican Party and almost anti-establishment really in the US. And what we've seen with what he's saying here essentially is that the right-wing parties, in particular the UMP, need to distinguish themselves or separate themselves from these movements. Why? Because he's saying, look, this was voted for in the French Parliament. If you have a parliamentary party like the UMP that is giving its support to, hundreds of thousands of people on the street who are protesting against a law that was signed by Parliament, what you're doing as a parliamentary party is undermining the democratic process and undermining Parliament. That's his point. Now, it's interesting that other politicians, such as Henri Guénaud, who is a former speechwriter for Nicolas Sarkozy when he was president, he was also a presidential hopeful himself at one point, he demonstrated, he was out on the street yesterday with the Manif pour tous, and he said, you know what, Manuel Valls is a cynical strategist. What he wants, essentially, and what the Socialist Party wants, is for this French Tea Party type movement, or people outside of the political movement, to gain strength so that the right wing will be divided, so that the UMP party won't get elected next time out. So he's saying, you know what, I am going to go out on the street and support these guys. Their protests are legitimate, and I don't want to see the right split in the way that Manuel Valls would like it to be split, so that the Socialists would get re-elected in 2017. That's the gist of what he was saying.
Cynical strategist, quite ironic, really, one politician calling another one.
Right. I think there's a degree
they're all a bit guilty of that, really, aren't they?
Cynicism on both sides, Mark. Now, I think what's it's such a messy sort of broad movement, really, that I think it's worth taking a little bit of extra time to explain it. You'll remember this lady, Mark, Frigide Barjot, who was the main woman.
That's a stage name, isn't it?
That's right. She was really one of the main figures behind the whole movement last year. Now, she actually spoke to Le Monde on Saturday saying, I don't think people should go out on Sunday. In other words, this has been legislated for. But as this blog piece by René Kaplan points out, it is a very thorny issue at the moment, because there's a lot of other things going on at the same time. Last Sunday, we saw a day of anger on the streets of Paris, where you had racist elements, homophobic elements, anti-Semitic elements, and lots of other more moderate elements that were just angry with François Hollande. A big mess of angry people, ranging from extremists and racists to people who are respectably a bit angry with François Hollande's policies within a democratic way. So you had that last week, and you had the anti-gay marriage protesters that we saw yesterday partly supporting last Sunday's movement. Then you had, in the past week or so, another issue cropping up in schools across France, where there was a rumour that went wild by text message that there was going to be gender studies introduced to French schools. Now, what that rumour said is that the objective is to deny the difference between men and women, to encourage children to become transsexual or homosexual, and to encourage the early onset of sexuality. A lot of parents, actually a lot of Muslim parents, kept their children out of school because of this completely scurrilous and false rumour. It caused the government to come out and say, look, it's a gender equality class. All we're trying to underline here is gender equality. And overnight, about 30% of extra people signed up to the anti-gay marriage movement, which is traditionally driven by sort of conservative Catholics. And then you had Muslim families as well, who were largely targeted by this false, scurrilous rumour doing the rounds by text messages, joining forces. So you had hundreds of people, thousands of people on the streets of Paris yesterday. It's a messy...
It speaks volumes about the knife's edge that France is on in this idea of people blaming everybody for everybody else's problems.
That's it. And just kind of general anti-establishment sentiment, anti-Hollande sentiment. And people, I suppose, the danger of it being that people feel they can come out with any sort of justification and come out with racist comments or homophobic comments or whatever. So,
and of course, the internet gives them that forum which to do it, doesn't it?
That's right. Sadly. So I think Manuel Valls, when he talks about the French Tea Party, he mightn't be a million miles off the ball.
James, leave it there. Thank you very much. James Creedon with Media Watch. Thank you very much indeed. We'll take a short break. After that, we'll return, of course, with more world news and our eye on Africa. Stay with us, live from Paris.